to everyone flying into the great nation of Nigeria, which is the entire world. We're at the Murtala Mohammed International Airport, and we're going to be talking about the changes being made today and in the future to make this airport even more efficient. We will be having a conversation with Mrs. Olubunmi Kuku, the Managing Director and Chief Executive of the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria, who just clocked 100 days in office as the MD Chief Executive of FAAN. My name is Rodi Sodiri. Let's go and have this conversation. Mrs. Kuku, thank you so much for speaking to us. I wanted to ask you, when you got the appointment, when you heard that you were going to be the new leader of this regulator, how did you react to that?
Thank you very much. So first of all, we're not the regulator. FAAN is the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria. We're actually a provider. We provide the infrastructure for aviation in the country, at least at the 22 airports that we own and manage. But to go back to your question, I would say that it was mixed feeling. One, there was excitement, an opportunity to definitely serve the nation. But at the same time, I've been in the aviation industry before I went back into the private sector. I knew that it was going to be a tough assignment. There's quite a lot of work that needs to be done in the aviation sector.
So thank you for the correction. So a lot of folks do see FAAN as a regulator. So clear it up for us. What exactly does FAAN do?
So FAAN is actually an airport company. And what does that mean? So in Nigeria today, we own and manage 22 airports. So two things. By the ICAO standards, ICAO is the International Civil Aviation Organization, and that's the United Nations body that regulates aviation globally. We are required to provide fire as well as aviation security support to airports that we also do not manage. Now, for the airports that we manage, as a federal government, we do provide all of the infrastructure. And when I say infrastructure, it's threefold. So first on the land side, so the land side is where you look at all of the things like parking facility, access, toll, some of the other commercial ventures. On the terminal side, so really looking at, things around making sure that you have access control, the check-in facilities, all of that. And then on the air side, we're also responsible for the runway. So looking at the runway, the apron, the pavement, all of the watchtowers, and all of the navigation facilities. So while we don't provide air navigation services, we also help support some of that infrastructure. Now, a lot of people do come into the airport space and, they talk about FAAN. They see, the green and white sign and say FAAN is supposed to be providing this. We do provide the infrastructure, but we also rely on a lot of other organizations, both private sector-led organizations and federal government-led. On the private sector side, we rely on ground handling companies. We do have the likes of NACO and SACO who provide ground handling support. And what that means is, for example, when you go into a check-in counter and you want to check in for your flight, you will typically expect to see airline staff there. So yes, we do have some airline staff, but you also have people from the ground handling companies. They also help us with moving your bags or your cargo from the aircraft to the baggage conveyor belt. Now, you also see other agencies. So when you're coming in and you're checking in, once you go through check-in, you go through the access gates, you would have to encounter agencies like the immigration services, customs, we have NDLEA, we have EFCC, quarantine services, quite a number of organizations who are working with us to make it all come together.
That's a lot under your umbrella. This 100 days, it's a milestone for you. Can you talk about the challenges and accomplishments so far?
I started off the conversations by talking about the aging infrastructure that we have. But there are also simple things that are wrong where I know that we can do better, and we started putting those into action almost immediately. So you work into the terminal, the first thing you experience is it's really hot or you're getting harassed by the door, when you're coming in, obviously because of the need to limit the number of people coming into the terminal. If you're in other countries, no one's asking you the questions, but we also understand the peculiarity of Nigeria. So we've had some security hazards, in the last few years that we're trying to avoid. But I'll try and break down some of the things that we've tried to do differently. When you come into an airport environment, there are two things that are critical. So one is the fact that your core business is to make sure that you're being facilitated through the terminal in a seamless and efficient way. And there are also things around, the passenger processing times. How long does it take you from when you come in, if you have to park or if you're dropped off, to when you actually check in, go through the boarding gates, the immigration gates, stay in the lounge, and then you jump on your flight. There are also things around just the basic facilities where we've had a lot of challenges. So the state of the toilets, we've had issues with sanitation coming on board. So we sprung into action very quickly. One of the very first things is we're engaging extremely well with private sector organizations. So if you go into the E-wing of the old terminal, we did have Shell who helped us with a bit of rehabilitation walks. So when you come in, it's a better process in terms of when you go through immigration as soon as you come out of the gates. We've also started working on really just sanitation, so the toilets. But, that also comes back to us. So a lot of times, yes, it is the responsibility of, us as FAAN to maintain the facilities, but it's also that of the individuals who are actually using it to also make sure that, they're sort of keeping and putting things in shape. So for us, there are a couple of things that we're looking at in terms of achievements. We've been able to open, what we call One It Right. One It Right is our international runway. We have 2 runways that serve passengers in Lagos. We have the One It Left, which is typically for domestic passengers. And then we have the One It Right, which is for international landings. We sprung into action very quickly, of course, with the support of the Honorable Minister, as well as the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry, to make sure that we engaged the contractor, we're able to bring them back to site because they had already abandoned the project at that point. So we brought them back to site. We made sure that the runway was up and running. We're able to do that within our first 60 to 70 days of joining FAAN. We're also able to make sure that all of the approach lights, the airfield lights are up and running. In terms of major infrastructure upgrades, we've been able to do that. We've really spent a lot of time assessing and really just prioritizing where we need to make some infrastructure upgrades. Another thing that we consider to be high priority is really around the passenger experience at the terminals. So one, looking at some of the things that we can do differently. So if you look out at the terminals in terms of what the line is like, so how do you structure that? Yeah. How do we make sure that we're able to use some sort of digitalization to improve the experience? So having an idea of how long it's going to take you to check in at every point in time. We're actually encouraging the airlines right now to start to use those self-check-in counters. We did a pilot with Turkish Airlines a couple of weeks ago. We're making some tweaks, and hopefully in a couple of weeks, those will also become available.
That was very robust and comprehensive. And it looks like you are very much focused on infrastructure and the passenger experience. And I guess they're intertwined. So fantastic. All right, let's take a walk.
Absolutely. Happy to show you around.
Good afternoon, passengers.
Honestly, aviation is a 24-hour operation. We're running, as I mentioned, 22 airports and managing 5 others. So there's really no sleep. Yeah. Fortunately, I do have quite a number of competent airport managers, but they really do need the push and the support that they haven't had. We've just started a culture accreditation program. I mentioned that earlier, really to try and reorient them and make them owners and managers. I'm supported by a group of very competent directors as well. So we had some directors come in, and I think they came in barely a week after me, so in December. Quite exciting times. I would say it's been very busy. I've had days where I've been woken up at 4:30 a.m. because of challenges that we've had within the airport environment. But, we take it a day at a time.
Can you speak a little more about, some of the initiatives you've taken on to bring investment, to the airports? And so
I just came back from Minna about 2 weeks ago. We had Mr. President himself, as well as the governor of Niger State, where, they really just rebranded the airport and also made some modifications in terms of terminal upgrades. But at the same time, there's an agro-export processing zone that will be happening there. We also have Ogun State doing something very similar. We also have our secondary airports that we're going to try and drive additional traffic to those locations, obviously driven by GDP growth or economic activity in that area. So we're also looking at, we have some cargo terminals that are coming up. We're also able to drive cargo. So by the way, cargo is like a big initiative for me. It also is very critical for the Honorable Minister as well as Mr. President. I mean, if you look at the likes of, Enugu, you're looking at Aba, you're looking at Jos, we have a potential to export crops, leather out of the country. You know, we're also making sure that we have cold chain processing facilities. We do see cargo as the future. Airport for Exports is really one of the key initiatives within this administration that we're going to be driving.
Mrs. Olubunmi Oluwaseun Kuku, you have exemplified how important the aviation sector is to the wider Nigerian economy, and you've shown that your expertise is being laid out in front of us. So I want to thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us. You've had an awesome 100 days. We wish you another successful 100 days, and we're going to catch up with you again, to see how far all these initiatives that you put on to be molded into your vision play out. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Versus. It was nice to see you and have you in our facility.
It's been a fantastic conversation with the Chief Executive and Managing Director of the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria, Mrs. Olubunmi Oluwaseun Kuku. We talked a lot about infrastructure and also the customer experience and how they marry together to make aviation one of the most integral sectors in Nigeria's economy. Until next time, I'm Rodu Sodiri.